Thank you, Chair. It's very difficult for me to really bring in any wise points at this stage, given the fact that I've been preceded by several wise men already. Particularly, I would say, Dr. Rajiv Kher, who's from the Commerce Ministry and who's probably been in the midst of all the negotiations that did happen with the FTA. But I'm going to pick on some of the points that were made in the morning and some points that have been made now to make my own point, basically counter some of these points, as is bond of an academic, I would say. The first, I think, what was said in the morning, which was in terms of centrality, and when I think Dr. Mohan Kumar mentioned that we should keep the economics out. I think my effort in my last decade at JNU has been to bring in the economics when we talk about foreign policy and international studies. I think there's a complete isolation and disassociation between the two that probably emaciates the foreign policy more than strengthening it. That's just a point that I make, not particularly with respect to India-ASEAN. But the other point that was being made in the sense of keeping economics out and China out, I think I want to bring that in the sense of if we talk about global value chains or if we talk about India's integration in the value chains and we look at some of the statistics. I've been trying to do this in the last couple of weeks and days, trying to analyze the value-added database for India, and what we see is absolutely dismal in the sense of where India figures in as far as global value chains are concerned. If India doesn't as yet have a place as far as in the global value chains, we have even, it's probably a more marginal space that we have as far as regional value chains are concerned. Until and unless India is able to really integrate itself in the regional value chains, the talk of India being able to ride on ASEAN centrality, irrespective of whether ASEAN has the within ASEAN unity or not, would be futile because it doesn't work without that. China, I think someone had mentioned in the morning strangulation by China of the ASEAN economies. I don't think one puts it as strangulation, but so tied, so intricately tied are some of these economies to China that it's inevitable that China has the position that it does have with these economies. I think that's also a reason to a very large extent for many of the different stance or differences in stance that are held by many of these countries in the last few years that we've seen as far as ASEAN summits are concerned. As far as the ASEAN trends are concerned, I think this was also mentioned earlier that the glass is half full. I think Mr. Kher mentioned that we should not be questioning FTAs. It's easy to question them, but I would say why not? If we look at the FTA performance as far as India-ASEAN is concerned, broadly speaking, there is very little difference in the trade trends. I think this is a study that I did for RIS some time back, where we've shown that there is almost no difference as far as trade trends are concerned pre and post implementation of the FTA. And I think when we'd done the study, one part, that is normal track 1, had already been fully implemented. Even now, if we look at the statistics, I don't bring the statistics because I think getting into minutiae in terms of numbers may not help, but the broad conclusion is that the implementation of the FTA pre, post, till date has not really made a huge difference as far as trade is concerned. Why shouldn't we review the FTA? Why shouldn't we look at why the FTA has not been utilized the way it was expected to? If, as Dr. Mohan Kumar said, that we had given in a deal because we wanted another deal in the services sector, which we did not, in the services liberalization, which we did not, I think that that also shows the capabilities as far as India is concerned in terms of negotiating a trade deal. We had come across hard bargainers as far as ASEAN is concerned in terms of the goods trade deal. Why did we go in for something that was less than what we had initially started with is probably better answered by the people sitting from the wise men sitting here on the panel. The other thing that I would want to highlight is, in the context of exports and imports, if you look at the shares, if you look at export share, if you look at the exports, then the rates of growth are aligned with the rate of growth of overall exports as far as India is concerned. But the imports from ASEAN always exceed the rate of growth of India's overall imports. We've been importing far more from ASEAN than we have been exporting, even in terms of growing as far as exports are concerned, relative to imports. The surge in deficit, I think we are all familiar with that as far as ASEAN is concerned, something that we need to look at. Given that, I think it's hard to think that we would be able to integrate in the value chains that ASEAN has at present. Going a little more into a little more detail as far as imports and exports are concerned, if we look at the sectors, I've just done a sector-wise, very broad analysis, for the last couple of years. In fact, for the last decade, if we see the dominant exports, the only major change that we see in the exports to ASEAN is with meat and meat products. None as far as the highly manufactured sectors are concerned. The ASEAN value chains really, at least as far as the ASEAN 6 or 5 are concerned, would be in terms of machine and machine appliances, or would be in terms of electrical appliances, electronic goods. India doesn't figure in there as far as major exports are concerned. We don't really become a part of the value chains of the ASEAN that it so intricately has with China. I think to enter at that level we need a strategy for that. We need to really think hard for that. Just saying that we need to enter into value chains as far as the region is concerned with the ASEAN 6, when the sectoral differences are so stark, may not be so easy. Textiles and garments was mentioned earlier. I think CLMV was mentioned earlier. The only country that I see our exports increasing to in the last decade is Vietnam, having entered into the top 25 trading partners for India. I don't see any of the other smaller countries. As far as the smaller countries are concerned, integrating in terms of textiles and garments, are they really up there in terms of the product cycle where we specialize to be able to integrate with these economies? I find that hard to believe, given that if you look at Myanmar, I think it's at the lowest end in terms of textiles and garments value chains. Where do we fit in with that? I would want the answer probably if that's possible. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here is, again, something that I would want to say a pinch of salt when we talk about the fact that we've had a good, strong relationship in terms of trade with ASEAN. I think in terms of ASEAN's total trade, we are only about 2% of the total trade. Is that so? Yeah. 2 or 3% that we have. As far as, India has a small share, I think 1.3% in 2005, today 2.7%. In comparison with the country that we do not want to mention, 14% as far as China is concerned. Intra-ASEAN itself is 24%. So where do we really stand in terms of ASEAN's trade picture, trade scenario? We really have to work hard in terms of being able to trade more with the region. The other thing that was mentioned, I think one answer that probably I would have Pranav probably bring in later is in terms of non-tariff barriers. There is a lot of talk by the industry in terms of the non-tariff barriers that are set up or that are instituted by the ASEAN countries. If we can have some kind of a greater, probably, if we can have a group, a group of experts or a collaborative project, which would be in terms of identifying these and then being able to negotiate on some of these, maybe we would be able to make some headway as far as our exports are concerned. The other aspect I think that was mentioned was RCEP. I think I also had this listed down in terms of the competitive elements that are arising in the region in terms of the TPP having come back. We were comfortable with the TPP having been out of the picture with the US withdrawal, but with now the Japanese push, we do have the TPP back in the region. With the TPP coming back and with overlapping members with RCEP and with all members having the option to move on to any of the trade formulations that they wish to, India has to really buck up if it really wants to be a part of any of the trade formulations. Again, I think I would like to ask Mr. Kher, why is it that we've had the most difficult stance being put forward by India in RCEP negotiations when we've done the differentiated offer of the three-tiered offer, I think, which is unheard of in terms of bilateral FTA negotiations. But we offered that kind, or in even the regional trade formulations. When we've done that, I think it was hard for any other member to accept this kind of a differentiated offer. Obviously rejected. I think I've heard now, I believe, that the Indian side has relaxed its stance. We are now willing to move forward with with a uniform kind of a concession, but which is still less than what the other countries are willing to offer. I'm not sure if that's going to take the RCEP forward, but the need to take the RCEP forward is, I think, most critical for India. Given the fact that this is an ASEAN-centered, if I may continue to say that, it's an ASEAN-centered trade formulation, and our relationship with ASEAN would probably be giving us the necessary momentum or the necessary footing in the region to be able to participate in any trade formulation. TPP that derives its membership from the APEC, I don't think we have any chance there, particularly given the kind of negotiations that they have on WTO plus provisions, regulatory reform, and so on. Given that, I think it's important for us to really build our relationship in terms of value chains with the ASEAN, but I tend to differ with the earlier speakers in terms of the sectors and the countries that we need to emphasize on. I think an important element here would be in terms of really doing something as far as our own domestic industry competitiveness is concerned. We've gone on far too long with protecting domestic industry, even if we've had the odd industries in terms of leading some kind of value chain integration in automobiles. These are some of the most protected sectors for us. I think we need to do away with that. It's only then that we can think of competing in the region or even integrating ourselves with the region. The last point that I want to make is, I think, again, something that was made earlier, which was in the sense of us being able to access China through the ASEAN if you're able to go through with the RCEP. My question would be, I want to put another question here, not necessarily to counter this point, but to ask that in the RCEP, how do we plan to negotiate or how do we plan to converge our existing FTAs with CEPAs or CECAs with Japan, Korea, and the one that we are negotiating with Australia and New Zealand? On parallel tracks, all of these running, do we see a convergence at all with these with the RCEP? Do we see anything in terms of looking at ASEAN as a centerpiece in this entire context? Thank you so much.
Thank you for those provocative remarks. I agree with the penultimate remark about the competitiveness of the industry, and we will try and put Mr. Pranav Kumar on the mat, as it were. But first of all, of course, Mr. Kher whispered into my ears as you were talking that he no longer works for the Commerce Ministry, which is a fair point. But I will nevertheless, give him the floor maybe towards the end after getting the questions to kind of round up, because I still think, very honestly, and no modesty here, I think he is the best informed in terms of what happened. So, Mr. Rajiv Kher, I would request you towards the end, if you can come in briefly and address some of the points, because I think you're the right person to do it, frankly. That's one. No, the other thing, Dr. Amita Batra, I mean, you're entitled to your views. The one thing, though, with which I violently disagree, and this is not even my own performance, we have a former Commerce Secretary, we have a former ambassador to the WTO who has gone for a bathroom break. He's used to Geneva, so he's gone out. Jayant Dasgupta, who's an old friend, really. The one thing I will tell you categorically, I mean, perish the thought of Indian negotiators doing badly. They're the most cussed, myself included. I was a former Uruguay round negotiator. And if anything, they err on the side of caution. This is something I can tell you without fear of contradiction. We did this survey in Geneva. Our negotiators are just absolutely brilliant. If you can accuse them of anything, and I would, certainly, and I'm in a way accusing myself since I was a former negotiator myself, is you can accuse them of sometimes acquiring too much policy space. The obsession for policy space in the government circles and then merrily not doing anything about it. That is my biggest problem. Get policy space, it's fine. And I think that is absolutely justified in a country like India. But do something about it. You know, Uruguay round, we were so keen to get a textile and clothing agreement which was not backloaded. In other words, we wanted competition to happen much earlier. Can you imagine what your textile industry would have done if only we had agreed to everybody in JNU? Sorry, that was a jibe, uncalled for. But you guys were saying, why is the textile agreement so backloaded and so on? The problem is, if it was not backloaded, it would have given us even lesser time to adjust. So I think, the negotiators' jibe is something that I will not accept. And I think they're really, and they don't even belong to my service, so you don't have to think I'm being charitable. These guys are very, very good. I've worked with almost all of them. And that is one thing you should be absolutely clear about in your own mind. I think they follow briefs and they do it in a way which is quite amazing, actually. If you look at what has happened in WTO and in FTAs, I don't think that is a proposition that can be said. Having said all of that, my question to you is really, you can think about it while I give the floor to Mr. Pranav Kumar, is the following. First of all, the answer to your question as to how it happened, if this was the bum deal, I mean, you didn't say bum deal, I'm putting words in your mouth, this India-ASEAN FTA and services agreement, if the bargain was that you give in on goods and you get something in services, you are saying essentially it's turned out to be a bum deal, and that's an argument you can make. My answer to your question is geopolitics. You can't stay alone. I mean, this is just way too important to be left to mercantilist thinking trade people, frankly. There is no other way to explain this deal. It is way too important in terms of what is happening around the region. So I think that is something you have to accept. The second and perhaps more important point is that ultimately you're yourself making the point that India has to be part of the value chain. We are notorious for reforming under conviction. We always do so only under compulsion. You know that. You know that as well as I do. We will not do anything unless we are put in a situation where we have to do it. So much so, at one time,